Hi friends, welcome to Coordinate, and today we want to understand on how we can work with external JavaScript files which we need now to use to do some work on a different HTML document. In our previous session, we were understanding on how we can place and where we can actually place JavaScript content or codes or statements inside an HTML document. An HTML document is simply a document which has the extension .html, like this document which is firstjs.html. So we want to see, okay, instead of placing now JavaScript statements and codes inside an HTML document, which is, we can call it internal JavaScript because it is inside an HTML document. Let's see how now we can create external JavaScript files and then just get a reference to those files for we to implement the effects inside an HTML document. So you can tell that this is simply a basic HTML based page, of course, which also contains few content of CSS, which is internal CSS. You can denote that by knowing, of course, I've used the style as an element of HTML to denote that the content in between is CSS based. So you can tell that this is simply a simple code, should I say. I mean, this is why we were even saying if we want to understand more on JavaScript, we need to have at least the basics of HTML and CSS. So the actual web page that I have implemented, this is the actual web page, of course, which is firstjs.html, and I'm only printing out a few content on this web page, JavaScript, and then I'm saying, okay, the greatest programmer once said, of course, we don't know what this programmer, he or she, said. So let's progress now. We want to see how we can implement now an external JavaScript file. So for we to do that, go on where it says file. That's if you are using the same IDE as the IDE we downloaded in these sessions, and go on where it says new text file. Immediately when you click on new text file, a new editor will pop up, and you can denote that this new editor is definitely untitled. Unlike for the HTML document, it is firstjs.html, but we don't know the extension for this document. This document won't be .html because it is JavaScript based. So to say, we'll save this document with the extension .js because JavaScript has the extension .js, or should I just say JS stands for JavaScript, hence .javascript if we were to say that. So to save this file, please Ctrl S to save the file, or if you don't love shortcuts, then go on where it says file and again click on where it says save. Immediately when you do that, you'll be sent to a certain directory where you need to save this file. Now in this session, please get this cleared, please get this vividly. In this session and the next few sessions to come, we'll be saving JavaScript files inside the same folder where we have saved the actual HTML document. So what we are saying is the HTML document is in this folder. So in this same folder, that's where we will save the actual JavaScript file which we are creating. You will see the benefits of doing so, but if you understand on how you can save, of course, JavaScript files in a different folder and then specify the actual directory inside an HTML document for you to use the actual JavaScript document that has been created, which is saved in a different folder, then you can proceed to doing so. But so far for now, on Coordinate here in these sessions, we'll be saving in the same folder, but in the other sessions to come, we'll start now saving in a different folder because by then we'll be ready and we'll understand more on the actual implementation of things and what we are doing and what we will be doing definitely. So I will save in this same folder. If I go back now on the actual IDE, you can tell that definitely my document is still untitled. So I need to give the name to this document. The name, you can give it any name, although the name should be descriptive. So I will just say, okay, JS project. Of course, this is the actual name, JavaScript project, and then we need to select the actual extension which this document should have on the field which says save as type. Immediately when you click on that field, you'll be taken to different extensions that can be applied to this document. Select the extension which is written JavaScript, which is the actual extension where my cursor is. Immediately when you do that, go on where it says save. When you do that, definitely boom, you can again foresee that yeah, our document was untitled, but for now it is JS project.js. I mean JavaScript project.javascript, meaning we have successfully saved our external document. Don't forget, it is in the same directory as the directory where we've saved our actual HTML page, the page that will receive the effects that will come from this page. So let's not just try to implement certain codes. If you don't understand how these codes are being done and how they are working out or anything related to that, please don't worry. The actual aim for this session is just to understand how now we can implement an external JavaScript project and then give it a reference in the HTML document which is being displayed by the actual browser that you are using. You individually, I personally am using Google Chrome. So to implement, just to print out something on the screen, let's say okay, I like using the functions because I love functions. So I will just say okay, I'm implementing a function and the actual name for this function is function 1. That's the actual name for this function. And then immediately I need to specify the parentheses, meaning if we were to receive any, of course, argument coming from, of course, the HTML document or from anywhere, we can pass in the parameters in these parentheses. But for now, we just want to print out something. Open the curly braces, and for we to print out something, we will use a certain method that can be used in JavaScript when we want to print out something on the screen. Don't worry if you don't understand this method. In our next session, we'll understand this method more vividly and of course in depth, and we'll also understand the different types of ways in which we can use if we want to print out something or to send something on the screen. So we'll say okay, get element. We are saying get element because the actual content by ID, because the actual content will stick to the ID that was specified in these parentheses, and the ID should be in between the double quotes. And then what ID? Okay, we'll just say ID underscore 1. So this is the actual ID that will go and give the actual element that we will use for we to print out the content that we want to print out. So now, what's the content that we want to print out? So we'll print out the content that will stick to inner HTML. We'll use inner HTML, of course, inner HTML. Don't worry if you don't understand this, we will understand in our next session. And then the assignment operator, then the actual content that we want to print out, since it is a string, then it needs to be in between the double quotes. If you don't understand what these are, you will understand this in our next session. For now, we just want to see if printing out something can happen coming from the external document of JavaScript. So we'll say okay. Also, the greatest developer once said, full stop. Don't forget, each and every line of JavaScript, as in for now, since it is the standard way of programming, will be being terminated with a semicolon. But on the internet, you find different codes, of course not having semicolons. Don't worry, that can also work out. But standards will use a semicolon, and that's the best way, and that is the professional way of doing the programming and anything related to that. So now we've implemented, of course, a function which will print out also the greatest developer once said. But how will this be printed out now when it comes to HTML? That's the actual major question that we need to understand. Okay, we've implemented the JavaScript thing and anything related to that, but so how will this now work out when it comes to the HTML document? Well, we need to go on the HTML document, and like we said from our previous session, we specified saying immediately we think of working with JavaScript inside an HTML document, we shouldn't be forgetting what we call the scripting elements. The script element is the actual element that can even now allow us to work with the JavaScript which has been declared externally. So to do that, we need to use, of course, the script as an element, and from the elements of HTML, our sessions in HTML, we said an element of HTML should have the opening and the closing tag, the starting tag and the ending tag. And if there are any attributes are simply things that add description to the elements of HTML, then those attributes should be implemented in the opening tag of the script as an element of HTML. So to implement the element, let's of course provide now the opening tag for the script as an element of HTML, which will definitely send us to the directory or to the actual folder where we've saved the JS project as simply a .js document that we've implemented. So we'll say okay, the less than sign, which will denote that we are starting now to create definitely the starting tag of the scripting as an element of HTML, and then we'll just say okay, script is the actual keyword which denotes that we are working with script as an element of HTML, and immediately when we close the actual IDE, this is why I love Visual Studio, will provide the ending tag. If the IDE you are using has not provided the ending tag, then you can, do that manually, it will work out. So, okay, we've implemented the script as the elements of HTML. So now what? The JavaScript file is externally based. So since it is externally based, then we need to specify the actual directory or folder where this HTML document should fetch the actual JavaScript project which we've implemented. So to do that, what we use is simply an attribute which is called the source, src for source, as an attribute of HTML. If you don't understand attributes of HTML, double check our sessions from HTML as a course. You understand what they are and what they can do. So we've of course implemented the src as simply an attribute of HTML, and the equal sign and the double quotes, of course, also the cursor blinking in between. So for what we need to get the reference, if you've saved the actual file in the same folder as the folder where you saved, meaning the HTML document, what I need to implement in between the double quotes is simply the name for the JavaScript project that we implemented, which is JS project.js. So meaning, yes, definitely I've implemented the code for that. And finally, we've done our best because we've given a reference, to the JavaScript file that was implemented. So yeah, we've given the reference, but will this print out something on the screen? Well, the answer is a no. So for we to print out again something on the screen, we need to understand that there are some, of course, not mandate, but there are some things that we need to implement inside this HTML document, and immediately that thing has been clicked on, it will call the actual function that we have implemented in the JavaScript as a document of JavaScript. Function 1. This is function number 1. The name should be descriptive and anything related to that. But don't forget that we specified that this content, which is also the greatest developer once said, needs to be printed out on the element of HTML which has the ID _1. So we need to double check, okay, where can we print out this thing? It needs to be printed out on the element of HTML. Well, we can use a paragraph. If you don't understand this fully, don't worry. We just want to see if JavaScript externally can work inside an HTML document. We'll be understanding more of these things in our next session, typically and in depth if we were to say. So we'll say, okay, the ID for this which is an element of HTML, a paragraph, is simply ID1. Now let's implement a button. Immediately when you implement a button as also an element of HTML, immediately we implement a button, okay? And then what is the type of this button, which we can call, of course, type. the type of this button is simply a button. We don't want to add any special things and anything related to that. And then we'll say okay, on click, meaning once the user clicks on this in this button, then the function which we have implemented, which is definitely function 1 including the parentheses, should be called. So this is what we are saying. Okay, once on click, this function should be called. Why are we working on the opening tag of this button as an element of HTML? It's because each and every attribute that needs to be implemented in HTML, that attribute needs to be in the opening tag of each and every element of HTML where it needs to be applied, not in the closing tag. No. So immediately we close these as the opening tags, then you will see that automatically this IDE will even provide the actual ending tag for the button as an element of HTML. So okay, what can we display now on our browser? We'll say okay, click here. So immediately when we do that, Control S to save. If the your documents are not on auto save, Control S to save the two documents. Or if you want not to be bothering yourself in saving the documents and doing the Control S and anything related to that, go on where it says file only if you are using the Visual Studio Code as an IDE, and click on where it says autosave. Then the documents will be being saved automatically. Let's go on our browser. We want to see if the effects have been implemented. So we refresh, of course, the actual browser. Okay, the greatest programmer once said. So click here. Immediately when we click here, JavaScript will display also saying also the greatest developer once said. So since our work is successful, it means we have understood on how we can implement definitely external JavaScript files and call the directory where they have been saved inside an HTML document, like we did, of course, where we said okay, the SRS, which is source, as simply an attribute, is equal to javascript.js. So this is where it's tricky. If you've saved your JavaScript in a different folder, then you need to specify the folder name. Of course, follow the syntax that we have displayed on the actual screen. The screen that you are seeing, for you to display the content that is in your JavaScript document. Else, if you saved in the same folder, then this video should be enough. And please, let's progress on our next session as we understand more on JavaScript. Please don't forget to subscribe, and you are on CodeNet.